That's it, Shirish. Okay. And Cynthia Murphy, Director of the Canadian Immigration Integration Project, CIIP, of the Association of Canadian Community Colleges. Mr. Ranjan Chaudhary, Principal Program Development in the National Skill Development Corporation, and Dr. Rajan Saxena, Vice Chancellor of the Narsimunji Institute of Management Sciences. May I ask Mr. Shailesh, before I invite Shailesh to take over and moderate the session, I'd like to thank our session partners. ILSC, Mr. Rod Harding is here as well, and who have supported us for the session, and Maple Edu Connect, Mr. Vinay Chaudhary, who is here as well. Thank you very much for your support, and thank you for being here with us as well. Over to Shailesh.
Thank you. I apologize on behalf of the Chamber for making you sit through a session at 2 in the afternoon. Most of what we're going to do during this session is try and figure out how India can improve on its education journey and its skills journey. And I'd like to start by raising 2 points and then hand it over to Dr. Saxena to give his points of view. Each of us will take about 5 minutes to give our points of view, and the rest of the session will then be a Q&A. India started its IT journey sometime in the mid-80s, and by about 95, India was about $2.5 billion in revenues. Between 95 and 2010, that $2.5 billion in revenue became $100 billion. In less than 15 years, that journey moved from $2.5 billion to $100 billion. The reality was that it could have been $200 billion. The quantity of talent in this country was more than sufficient. We just didn't get ourselves together on determining what kind of leadership the companies that provide IT services from India need, and what kind of talent it needs on the ground, and which parts of the country it needs that talent on the ground in. Now, when you look at such a phenomenon happening out of talent, you ask yourselves, how would you do this for the different segments of the future of India? IT is now more of a commodity sector, but it still has a lot of headroom. What happens to auto? What happens to media and entertainment? What happens to pharmaceuticals? And how do we nurture future talent in sectors which are all going to cross $100 billion in GDP contribution in the next 10 to 15 years? And then the second point, which I spoke to all my colleagues on the dais about, was, it took Germany and the UK 200 years to industrialize. It took the US 100 years to industrialize. It took Japan less than 75 years to transpire that through that journey, and it's taken China less than 40 years. Obviously, there has been some phenomenal transfer of talent, education, ways to do things, innovate or improve from the learnings of the past, not repeat mistakes, etc. How do we use a combination of these 2 points to figure out how India will embark on its catching up with China journey? Over to Dr. Saxena.
Thank you, Shailesh. And I think you did you did make a very, very interesting kind of point, which was in terms of the kind of journey that India has made in the IT sector and has made a mark at the global level in the IT sector. And perhaps the question that comes back is that when we look at the GDP, when we look at the growth of some of the other sectors, what is the role of the talent? What are we really doing on talent development in the country? I'd like to just sort of take you back in terms of, and I'll put across some of the kind of issues over here, along with what Shailesh Bhai just mentioned about it, and certainly a very valid kind of an observation. If we look back in terms of per se and look at what are the data that can possibly characterize this country today, we certainly are, we all know that we have a demography which is there with us. And it's been touted as a demographic advantage. We all know that, well, if we were to look at it, let's say, a population age of, let's say, between 16 to 24 years, by about 2025, we are talking, which is the kind of age group which is coming into that kind of an area of education and training for the purpose of an employability kind of thing. That's going to be virtually the second largest group in the population itself by 2025, which means almost about 30% of the population in the times to come is going to be in that 16 to 24 kind of an age group, which is a very, very large kind of a population group that we are saying. So that's a big challenge that we have, and we'll talk about it in terms of looking at what is the kind of challenge that is ahead of us. And also, if we were to look at the education sector, and certainly, well, let's say if we look at the IT sector, I think the biggest, a very big role has been played by the engineering colleges that came up in 1990s in really contributing to this kind of a potential or a contribution that IT sector has made to the world economy itself. So today, in terms of the education sector, we are today certainly ranked as second in the world in terms of enrollments, if we look at it in terms of the enrollments. So we have a scale in the higher education, but the problem that we have is still in terms of the quality. The quality of this kind of a system that we have today still becomes a big kind of a question mark, and which is where we will come back in terms of looking at what is the kind of challenge that we have ahead of us. Clearly, the question that we have over here, and if we look at it, is that we have a large talent. We have certainly seen the growth of the professional education in the last 2 decades itself in this country, whether it is engineering, it is medicine, it is management, it is computer education, name it. There's been a kind of a quantum growth. But more important thing is that this country is also known today for developing some very, very affordable innovations. Whenever we think of India, we are talking about affordable innovations. Great examples that exist in the IT sector, that exist in the automobile industry, exist in FMCG, exist in practically in all the sectors that we talk about it. So we are known for affordable innovations. But then if we have to continue with this kind of an affordable innovations, how do we convert this demography into a productive human resources? And if we look at the number of jobs that are expected in the next 4 to 5 years within the country, we are talking about almost about 90 million plus kind of jobs in this country coming in. And if we are talking about 90 million plus kind of a job, the education and the skilling challenge that we have is of a humongous kind that we can talk about it. And that's one area that we need to be considering about it. So the question that we come about is that how do we educate them? And what is it that we have over here? There are 2 big kind of chunks that we got to really to focus on in education area. One is the skills part of it. We today see a large number of engineering colleges having capacity which is unutilized. We see the reports after reports tell us almost about 90% of the engineers or management graduates coming out from our schools are remaining unemployed. Why is that happening? Because we have not really focused on the skills part of it. And the focus has to be in terms of the collaborative learning. So what are the skills? And I look at the skills not just merely from the point of view of the technical, because whenever we talk about the skills, invariably the discussion gets down towards the vocational skills. I think, yes, vocational skills are important for the country. But at the same time, what is important is to also develop the professional skills and the conceptual skills, which are so very critical. Today we have a deficit across the entire skill spectrum itself. And therefore, when I look at, let us say, the collaborative kind of learnings, today, that's where we are really talking about it. And finally, when I look at how do we overcome some of these kinds of challenges, I look at it in terms of the 3 parts of it. That is, what's the role of the government? What should the government be doing? What is it that the private sector institutions have got to do, the institutional part of it, and what is it that the industry need to be doing? And we have some kind of a perspectives. If you look at the government role, well, we all know that the government has a very major role in terms of providing the funds, for example, in education. It has played a very significant role right from the first 5-year plan down to the 11th 5-year plan that we are talking about it, which has just finished, closed it at 849 or $850 billion. The 12th plan is almost about $1,107 billion kind of an investment outlay, which is almost about 1.3 times higher than that of. So the government is today a very big kind of a, will be playing a very major role in terms of providing the necessary kind of outlays, but everything is not going to come from the government. The government is also a big provider of education in our country. Policy framework, what is it? And I think today we have a big problem on the policy sector. That's where I was telling Suresh Bhai yesterday, that the biggest problem that we have today is there is a policy crisis in education. We do not have a policy which today responds to the current challenges. What are our challenges? Access, improving the access itself, quality, innovation, faculty development, and encouraging global collaborations. Because if we have to really talk about it, being at par with China, if we have to catch up with China, then I think we have to focus on all these areas. Unfortunately, the policies does not really respond to that. And finally, when I look at it from the perspective of the private sector, well, private sector is going to be a very, very major player, both in terms of the setting up of the institutions, as also in terms of the, let us say, the funding the research. And I think the industry has a very, very major role to play with us. Institutions have a very major role. The role is transformative. And I think that's where we look at it from the perspective of collaborations, that when we start looking at collaborations and learning from other countries, I think we've got to really learn from how the institutions in the other countries have played this kind of a transformative role. So my piece is institutions have a transformative role, how to learn from other countries, and the second piece that I have is what big changes we need to be making in a policy framework, which is what is really needed for this country, which will encourage innovation, which will encourage excellence and global collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Over to Cynthia.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to present this afternoon. I'm going to start off by telling you a bit about ICBC and then focus in on the key questions that we're addressing in this session today. First of all, I won't go into a lot of detail about ICBC. You each have one of these on your chairs to explain better about who we are. So ICBC is a membership organization, and some members are here with me today, and I'd like to ask them to stand up to identify themselves. Please. And when we get to the question part of the program, others join. When we get to the question part of the program, I'm going to defer any institutional or questions that are not sort of umbrella organization related to these members, because these folks who are in the room are the experts. They are from the institutions who are working here in India, and so I think when those questions come up, it's much more appropriate that they answer them than I do. And I have asked them this ahead of time, so they're not totally surprised by this. So ICBC has 132 members from coast to coast to coast. You'll see we picked up one more member since this brochure was printed. We serve 1.5 million learners in 3,000 communities. And 1.5 million learners in the context of India is not much. In the context of Canada, it is, for a population of 34 million. So I like to think of it in terms of proportion rather than finite numbers. We deliver diverse applied programs in many sectors, and I'll just list a few because the number of sectors is huge. What I want to stress about the Canadian college system is the diversity of the learners, the diversity of the programs offered, just that it spans many, many sectors. And some of those are business, ICT, agriculture, animation, aviation, construction, health. The list is endless. Also, what's important for you to understand about Canadian colleges is we deliver diplomas, we deliver certificates, degrees, and advanced diplomas. So in addition to a wide range of sectors, a wide range of communities and learners, there's also a wide range of types of programming available. Interestingly, the average age of college learners in Canada is over 25. It depends on the institution and the province. And that relates to our demographic challenge, which is very different than the demographics of India. The median age in Canada now is 40. The median age in India, according to the latest source I looked at, was 25. So you can see our challenge is we've got a whole lot of people getting older. Who's coming through the system to fill the jobs, to fill the skills gaps, and quite frankly, to look after our aging population through improved health care. So the key to success in college programming, and that's the success of learners, the success of communities, and the success of employers, are keywords that we use to describe college programming pretty regularly. So it's flexibility. It's the ability to adjust program to remain current and relevant, and that relates to responsiveness. There's programming that meets the needs of industry standards and ensures seamless pathways to the education and training needed to be employable. And that's done through ensuring that work terms are part of every college program. That's done through using program advisory committees. So these PACs, as we call them, they're committees formed by industry reps, community reps, industry experts who come together to inform college programming. And they deliver or they provide that expertise through a consultative process that informs core programming and customized programming. I talked about the demographic challenge, and in part that's what's challenging our employers as well. Not only do we have a demographic challenge, we have a skills gap challenge in Canada. So we have regions in Canada where we have high needs for certain skills. For example, the ICT sector in Canada right now has an unemployment rate of between 2% and 3%, depending where you count it and who you talk to. There are jobs. We need people to put in those jobs. When you look at the energy sector, huge demand for workers, particularly those in trades and various jobs that will support that sector. We don't have the people trained to put in them. Yet the challenge of that, or the balance to that, is that we have communities in Canada where we have very high unemployment rates. So parts of Atlantic Canada, you have unemployment rates in the 15 to 25% range. So but people don't have the skills needed for the jobs. So that's one of the challenges. And I'm telling you this to try and relate to, how we can work with you in India to point out that we don't have a perfect system in Canada and a perfect setup, so that we can look together at how we can work in India. So the question that really, really came into my mind this morning was Nadira's question when she said not why India, but how India. And I think that's the point that we're at with the Canadian college system. This is the third trip for many colleges within a 13-month period. We're committed to working here. Our demonstration of that are the two MOUs that we've signed this week, one with the NSDC, which is an umbrella overarching MOU about, that's much better, thank you, about developing programs that are system-wide. And then under that, we signed another MOU with the Canada-India Water Training Consortium and the Reservoir Innovation Foundation. So we're developing college-to-colleges linkages and programs that are overarching as well. The one key piece, or the one advice that we have in looking at how we work with India to get there, to be there where we talked about, is to ensure that all activities and partnerships are relevant for the Indian context in India. And then when partnerships are two-way, which they always should be, that they're relevant in the Canadian context in Canada. So in conclusion, we can help India become a hub of learning by working at a system level and on an institutional level to deliver specific sector programs such as the ICT sector, or system programs such as teacher training, leadership training, curriculum development, and methodologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to Ranjan.
Once I get hold of a mic, I don't give it very easily, so it's good that I'm the last. And secondly, I love statistics. I leave it up to you to decide whether statistics are being used for illumination or for me like a lamppost as support. Okay, to take it forward, all of you are aware of India's demographics, and I won't go into the details. I will restrict myself to skills, because that's the area I work in. That's the area that I understand. The government is very committed in terms of its skills agenda, and hence we have something which is known as the National Skills Policy. And unlike policy documents, it is one document which I think is great, because not only is it a vision mission document, but is a roadmap as to how the government intends to achieve its mandate and who is responsible for what. When you look at you hear about skills, the problem with education, talent, the urgency is twin. One, of course, the more obvious one is the fact that if we need to grow at the rate that we need, the economic necessity is that we need to have a talent pool. But something which is not often looked at is that it is an imperative also in social terms. If we do not empower our youth to earn a decent living, we have a major problem in our hands going forward. This gets aggravated when you see or when you know of the high dropout rates that we have. Not very many people complete higher education or graduate. A lot of them are dropouts. Today, there are no academic or career pathways for them. When you look, so all this combined, the problem essentially in the skill space is a capacity challenge and a quality challenge. Capacity, when you look at the fact that there are almost 1 million kids entering the job market every month and will continue doing so month on month for the next 20 odd years, you can understand the enormity of the challenge. We do not have sufficient capacity to train this youth going forward. The second is the quality piece. I'll come to the quality piece a bit later. The government, unlike in the education space, as Dr. Saxena mentioned, when it comes to skills, the government has been very proactive in terms of policy. And I'll enumerate some of it. Apart from the skills policy, if you look at the National Youth Policy, which was announced recently, skills finds a significant mention in it in terms of focus. NSDC, the organization that I was created, was meant to encourage private sector participation in the skill space. Historically, if you look at VET, vocational education and training, it was perceived to be the government's responsibility. And we all know of the ITIs and the polytechnics. But as India progressed, somehow the supply side did not keep up with the demand side. So they remained in a time warp, whereas the need for talent grew exponentially, both in terms of numbers and in terms of the different skill sets that sort of emerged. When I passed out of college, you could be an engineer, a doctor, a bureaucrat, pretty much that. Now it's almost endless. So that being the case, the government, through deliberations, and NSDC probably owes its existence in some ways to C.K. Prahalad, who felt that it was imperative for private sector to come forward and look at training talent as a core deliverable. So we were set up, we are a government startup, but 51% of our equity is with the private sector. We are government funded, but we're a very small organization. None of us are from the government. So we are a unique experiment which is supposed to catalyze private sector into delivering. How many of you saw an ad yesterday in the Times of India on skills? Okay, that just shows how bad our ad was. Anyway, so in the last 4 years that we've been there, we've got about 120 private sector players who've decided to work with us to look at creating capacity for skills in a sustainable fashion as a business case. All of them trained about 14 lakhs in the 4 odd years that we've been in existence, and this number will go up exponentially as we go forward. We've got some marquee names working with us, and I'll just give you some. Asian Paints, Bharat Forge, Apollo, Max, Future Group, different sectors, different skill needs, but all of them have come forward to address this need, which is both a social and an economic. So things are happening. Now, the other part is in terms of policy. One of the skills or vocational trades is not aspirational. Anyone and everyone knows it. There are exceptions. Chef is one. And for those of you who want to do a little bit of research, find out how much the executive chef of this hotel earns. Find it. I won't tell you the answer, but it's astronomical. And that is a pure skilled profession. So it can get you places. So coming back, one of the reasons why vocational trades is not aspirational, because there are no pathways, both academic or career. But the government has worked in terms of policy to change this, and now there's a qualifications framework. It's a 10-level architecture from level 1 to level 10. Level 1 loosely corresponding to class 9, level 10 corresponding to PhD. It caters to both the academic stream as well as the vocational, and it allows for equivalence and mobility. So it's happening. Building blocks which were missing, frameworks that were not there are being built. All of this is work in progress. I like the way Cynthia put it. It's not should we work with India, but how India. Let me look at it from the Indian perspective. At least in the skills agenda, NSDC, we at NSDC, and so are the Ministry of HRD and MOLE, Ministry of Labor who work on it, actively looking at international collaboration / cooperation. But we are looking at an India model. You cannot copy-paste it. And in these 4 years, just to give you an example, we've had a fair degree of success. And I'm just giving you random examples. We've got a large-scale collaboration with Switzerland, with Swivet and Swissmem, which is almost a dual system similar to Germany, where the kid, after he passes out, gets an Indian certification as well as a Swiss one. We've recently signed up with City and Guilds, again for a large scale, for a UK-India collaboration piece, again large-scale sustainable. The third one, which is on the offing, is with Australia. We've been learning with different countries. Our half-life of learning has shortened, Cynthia, Henry. So I expect it to happen much more quickly with Canada. So the message I'm driving is that we look at building an India model, but taking in the best that the world is offering. And we believe in a sustainable model. That's a given. And I'd also like to pick on what Dr. Saxena said, affordable innovation. That's critical for us because when you look at the scale that needs to be addressed, when you look at the challenge of geography, we're not a country, we're a subcontinent. When you look at, we're actually 30 different countries masquerading as one, if you didn't realize it. But having said that, innovation is the only way we can address the need. Brick and mortar, chalk and talk, conventional ways of doing things will not work. And before Sailesh takes the microphone away from me.
Thanks, Ranjan. Actually, over to the audience. Questions, points of view. Somebody has mics for the audience?
You have aligned all the policy frameworks, the innovation that has to go into education, skill development. The NSDC has formed a policy, national skill policy, which is all excellent. For me, one major aspect which I will highlight from what I have seen till now is there has to be a significant change in the mindset of the person. That is from the bottom of the pyramid. Even if you look at IT as a sector, right, where the skills are of utmost importance and where we see the maximum growth, the mindset is, let me first try and get the low-hanging fruits. Then I'll do product development, then I'll do, so let me first take up a job of support or let's say a testing, just to identify few. So the mindset has to change right from the bottom of the pyramid. When a person goes to, let's say, a class 1 or even say KG, he has to be imbibed the mindset that if the gestation period is higher to achieve something, to grow, that is not failure. That is what I feel. The mindset has to change.
Thank you so much. The gentleman at the back wanted to say something.
Yes, my name is Rod Harding. I'm with ILSC Education Group. It's more of a follow-up question. So about 18 months ago, the ICCC was here and met with the National Skills Development Council. We were at the Emerging Kerala Convention. And one of the things that was on the table was the government support for a massive community college system in India. So, as panelists, if you could comment, it's more of just from the ICCC perspective, how is that progressing in terms of conversation and realities, and also from the Indian perspective from the Skill Development Council?
Okay. Much as I would like to, I can't respond to it because the reason is, again, and that's pretty much the silo system that we have. The community colleges initiative that you're talking about is an initiative under the Ministry of HRD. So that's their initiative and really wouldn't be able to comment on it too well. Cynthia maybe would be able to add.
Yes, there were 2 proposals that have been submitted to MHRD. Is this on? Or, okay. And we're still waiting for feedback on those proposals. As a result of that activity and 2 other trips that have happened to India, we've taken on a 2-pronged approach to working in India, quite frankly, and one is with the public sector and one's the private sector. And they will be, they intersect sometimes, but that's the approach that we're taking to working in India. And we're finding that the work with the public sector, sometimes there's a lot more process and it takes longer for things to progress than it does with the private sector. We don't want to lose sight of either one, but that's a long way of saying that there are a couple of proposals that have been submitted, but not much activity on them yet.
I just want to add one point, which is, if you take the community college issue that just got discussed, and you take the issue on the policy paralysis that the country has witnessed in the last few years, that Dr. Saxena alluded to, I'm not too sure we get it. I don't think any of our governments have ever been reticent about any of the governments, whether it's the BJP or the Congress or what have you. None of them have been reticent to helping industry grow. None of them have been reticent to helping education grow. I think our real challenge is we don't make the effort in getting the government to think through on what is required to get it right. And I'm sitting on the opposite side. I have to lobby with the government every day. That's my job. But every single time we come short on getting the government to start realizing what's right for the country, we end up failing, and blaming the government ain't the answer.
I think to be just expecting that the government is going to be doing something in this area is perhaps a little too far-fetched at this point of time. Certainly the initiative has to come up from the government in terms of setting out a policy framework. I'll just put this across because we have been participating in some of the policy discussions, both on behalf of FICCI and also as an institution itself. We have been, as an institutional leader, I've been participating in some of that kind of a discussion. I think the one part of it has been that the policy part of it piece is really ready. There's no issues on that part of it. Even the UGC has been able to come up with the kind of a document on in that area of the community colleges, and has invited the proposals today from the various kinds of institutions to set up the community colleges. But the I think the problem that is coming up today, when I look at it, is in terms of the appreciation of the community college concept at the at the institutional levels. That's one part of it. That's one piece which I see it very clearly. And I think we need to really understand that from the Canadian experience, also from the American experience, where the community college concept really exists. Otherwise, there are institutions which have really gone ahead in terms of setting up their own kind of a skills kind of an area. And they've set up their own kind of models of a skills development, be it in the area of textiles or in computers or in the area of, let's say, automobile, etc. But there are kind of areas in which the institutions have set up. Companies like, German companies like Bosch, for example, have come forward and have set up, let's say, their own centers today in the area of industrial automation, where there's going to be the training both at the certificate, the diploma, and at the degree level. And I think these are some of those kinds of experiments which are already on. So I come back to what Ranjan was saying. We perhaps do not need an American model, or we do not need a Canadian model, but what is really needed is to really understand from those kind of models and take a model which is going to work well for the country itself. And I think that's a kind of a perspective.
And there's a great opportunity here. Like you say, take from the best out there, put it together to make the Indian model, which, you know, what an amazing opportunity. And I think that, you know, the people that we've met with in the last few trips that we've had, they are committed to doing that. It's how do we take the pieces, the best pieces from Canada, the best pieces from Australia, the best pieces from America, to make that happen. The other comment that I wanted to just quickly make is that the Association of Canadian Community Colleges actually represents various types of institutions. So colleges, institutes, polytechnics, and community colleges. And there are only 6 of those left in Canada that call themselves community colleges. So that's important for you to understand in the context of how we would work with Canada, because the diversity of programming is huge.
Thank you, Zithya. Other questions? Good. I can ask my questions then. Thanks. So I raised an issue at the beginning of this conversation on how a country like India can, for example, develop talent for the potential growth India has in the pharmaceutical sector. Does anyone have points of view on how to help make that happen? How other countries, or how Canada may have done it, or how what you've learned in setting up NSDC can help do this? Even anyone in the audience? Yep. If the Canadian College Group, yep, sure.
Well, I think fundamentally what has to happen is that there's a supply-driven curriculum versus a demand-driven curriculum. Demand coming from industry and supply coming from the academics. And a realization has to happen in the country that what kind of curriculum is being developed here and how can it be changed to respond to the needs of India. So that's a fundamental, that's a basic that has to be addressed within India for India to change that paradigm that it currently enjoys. The other component is that the ongoing relationship between the community, right, the whole life, and governance. And those responsibilities as they go out are also fundamentals that need to be addressed. And lastly, and India is well on the way now, is with national standards and skills, so that occupations can be defined, right? And then as a national standard, the programs then can be delivered to those national standards, and there are 2 benefits to that. One is national mobility, working within the country, and the other is international mobility, because international governments will recognize those credentials and then address the whole concept of skilled workers working abroad and sending enhanced remittances home.
Thank you. Yep.
I was just wondering, amongst the panelists, how does the concept of learning centers or libraries fit in your models actually. See, the problem is in India, one of the things that helps talent growing is to have many libraries, which Canada has. And these are places which could be a community place to hold seminars and all in the evenings or after a person's daily routine. And it's a place where they can study. There's no opportunity like that anywhere, for instance, in North Bombay or anywhere in second tier or third tier cities actually. And I'm just wondering, could this be something that you all would fit into your models? I realize it costs money, but it's quite an important concept.
The importance of
Could, I was thinking you have, visiting people coming who are educated to give, sort of talks and inculcate some talents in them. This is something which is very important actually right across the country, and it's not there at all. So I'm going beyond libraries.
In the country, unfortunately, over a period of time, have not really been so successful, which was earlier funded, and we did public libraries. We, for example, right at the Horniman Circle, we had such a wonderful kind of a library. Much of it is really now in the domain of the NGOs, which is there. And I think this is where the NGOs and the private sector have to come forward. And much of the kind of libraries that I have seen, for example, in Canada or many of us would have seen, are really the ones that are supported extensively by a lot of, I would say, philanthropic contributions that have come up. Unfortunately, in India, we have really missed out on that kind of a philanthropic contribution. We need to be doing that. The second part of it is, I think we need to be leveraging today the technology. I think we do not today require the conventional model of the library. Today, the technology can really help us in terms of overcoming some of those issues that are there, both in terms of the funding as also in terms of the infrastructure. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the panelists and Nadira for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shailesh. Thank you, Cynthia, Dr. Saxena, Ranjan, all of you for a very interesting discussion. And thank you to our guests from Canada who were part of the convention today. I just wanted to request you, please, to remain in the room since the Governor General will be arriving soon, and the next session will be the address by the Governor General. It should be in a few minutes now. I think the media just needs to come in and start setting up. So while they do that, please be patient, and just in 10 minutes. Before I close this, I just wanted to thank again our session partners for this education session, ILSC and EduTech, Maple Leaf EduConnect, and also a special thanks to our partner, Neopolitan